Dr. Vickers, Shire's been a leader in the rare orphan disease space. Discuss how the lessons from developing therapies for rare diseases could be applied to precision medicine for more common diseases.
I'd be delighted to answer that question. Yes, so we have about 40 programs in clinical development at the moment. About 75 of them are focused on rare diseases. The way we look at precision medicine is targeting very specific patient populations. And many of the diseases that we focus on are genetic in nature, so we recognize that and we target accordingly. So it might be a gene therapy for hemophilia, it might be an mRNA therapy for cystic fibrosis, a protein therapy for hypoparathyroidism, or an enzyme replacement therapy. And we recognize that in more common indications like breast cancer, there's been a tremendous amount of breaking science that identifies subsets of patients that also have very specific genetic lesions. And so there's targeting of those patients. We think that's going to be happening more and more in more common indications. In fact, you may want to think that common indications may ultimately be seen as a range of more rare diseases, as it were. So I think
what's interesting, if you look at from a molecular level, all diseases are a rare disease.
That's right.
At a certain level, yeah.
Yes, and I think we're only now starting to get to understand that and understand what those genes are that drive those diseases and other genes that might influence those diseases. And I think companies that have been working on rare diseases can provide insights to the opportunities and the challenges associated with that actually could apply to those subsetting of more common diseases.
Right. And so when you're thinking about from a strategic perspective, how does Shire balance, some of the new modalities that you're trying to go after compared to some of the old ones and some of the older targets? How do you balance that?
So the way we try and do this is to understand what is driving the disease. And in many of the diseases that we are looking at, there's relatively little that's published about the disease. Sometimes you might understand what the genetics are that drive the disease. And once we've tried to understand what the disease is, we think, how do we target that? And in some cases, it's going to require a gene therapy. In some cases, we can provide something that the patient doesn't have. And it's sometimes a little bit more targeted than small molecules that can affect whole pathways. And that, because those molecules can have very positive effects, but also unpredictable effects on those pathways. So we try and have as much as we can a laser-like focus on addressing the needs of those patients with highly innovative approaches. So we don't walk away from more traditional modalities when they are the best fit, but we also do look at new therapies such as mRNA therapies, gene editing types of approaches, which can really target the specific challenges that those patients have.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at precision medicine and then you look at the complexities of clinical trial development, that's quite a different that's a big challenge to sort of marry the two. How does Shire think about, how do you think about how you can overlay what's going on the precision medicine front to fitting that into your product development and clinical development program?
It's a great question, because I think if you're looking at a rare disease or if you're looking at a small patient population that's within a large disease, some of the challenges are indeed the same, but the lens through which you need to do research and development can be very different. If you're looking at a small population within a broader population, perhaps the assumptions you made about the broad population don't actually apply to this smaller population. So you need to understand the disease, and in some cases, for example, we will do a natural history study to understand a small population and what the course of the disease is. If it's a small population, then there can be challenges associated with recruitment of patients. You can only run small clinical studies, and so you can't power them for some of the statistical significance you would get from larger studies. So you need to generate real-world evidence when you're on the market. The regulatory path, the clinical path, is unknown, and so we need people that can focus on building a path towards what makes a difference in patients' lives, rather than following a path that somebody else has previously laid out.
Dr. Vickers, I want to pick up on what you mentioned earlier about patient recruitment and the challenges that biotech and pharma companies have. Sort of what's needed to sort of improve that from a corporate standpoint? And then also, is there a communication or an outreach effort that might help that move that forward?
Yeah, it is a really challenging thing to recruit patients into rare diseases, and we think and hope that some of the new technologies that are out there will really help us in that regard. For example, you can now connect with patients at a distance in ways that you couldn't ever do before. You look at all the different types of social media that there are out there at the moment. So engaging, we're restricted appropriately restricted in terms of what we can directly do with patients directly, but working with third parties who can make patients and patient associations aware of the ongoing trials that there are in a space that they may be appropriate for is very important. And I also think it's linked to just the general educational need about the diseases, especially in the rare disease space. It's very important that we can educate, because the more we can educate, and we can do that with social media, the more we can educate, then the more that patients may be able to recognize they have a disease which can get treated.
Talk a little bit about your interaction with the patient community and patient advocacy groups, and how Shire sort of creates a community with them.
Yeah, it's critical. Our links with patient groups are really essential in many, many ways. First of all, it's around the clinical trials that we're running, but even more than that, if you're going to develop a meaningful therapy for patients and caregivers, you need to understand the burden that those patients and caregivers have. And so in many areas we're working where there is no effective standard of care, no drug has ever been developed. So how can we possibly develop a meaningful drug in the lives of patients if we don't understand the journey that they're on? So us understanding that journey, thinking what would make a difference in their lives, and then having a laser focus on novel, innovative therapies that will achieve that is critical, and the links with patient associations are essential as part of that.
Wonderful. Dr. Vickers, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Great to speak to you.